1 is a sequel to Everything Changes and Making My Way in that order. When there is no light, darkness falls over all. The story itself begins at chapter 39 in Making My Way, but something's different. For not so vile that on earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor aught so good, but stained from fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice by action dignified. William Shakespeare. The following pages are reflections upon the past, a memoir, if you will, an archive of important memories. But to me, it is both a memento and a memorial. Ashra. The freezing cold nails dripped into my heart, surrounding the core and trapping it. I understood my dreams. I understood what was going on. I understood the prophecy. I began speaking without even realizing what I was doing. All the while, I felt the dark energy surrounding me with growing strength. When humans have forgotten about us and their connection to Pokemon, they warned us of a time of great conflict between good and evil. From the midst of the evil will come a Mew more powerful than any other Pokemon, and even Mew in existence. With nothing but hatred in its heart, it will create a storm unlike any other. This storm will destroy the world, leaving nothing to be mercied by this unfeeling being. We call this Mew the Dark Mew, the last Mew to come into existence. Ash! I turned around. Nikiro was just waking up. I jerked away and closed my eyes. What do you want now? I asked. Ashra! What are you... what? I tightened my fists and glared at him. Nikiro, I think you have too much faith in me. Didn't you listen to the prophecy? He held himself up with the front of his paws and stared at me. Oh wait, you couldn't understand it. I tried to think of the right word. You couldn't see it, right, Mewtwo? What? I felt the ice seep through the holes it had made and begin to fill up the warm space inside. The last Mew to come into existence. Me. I looked at Mewtwo. You were second to last. You came close, but then I evolved. I looked at the ground, the same ground where I closed my eyes and tried to shut out the image in my mind, but it only grew stronger. The cold in my heart spread to fill me, and I began to freeze. This is the same place where I killed and ate my fellow Pokemon. But no, they weren't really my fellow Pokemon back then, were they? And does it even matter anymore? Why should I care about what does and doesn't matter? Does anything really matter? Mewtwo, you believe in fate, don't you? I asked, keeping my eyes shut. Yes, I do, he replied hesitantly. You saw what happened, in the seeings, and you know what I have to do. Ash. I didn't open my eyes. I could feel Nikiro's confusion and fear, but I could almost touch what Mewtwo was feeling, the cold frenzy of frightened knowledge, the wild disbelief of what he was witnessing. And then there was me, losing track of who and what and where and when and why, but there I was, all the same. I don't know what happened to me on that day. Looking back at it now, I wonder if it was a matter of simply making the wrong decision, but there's nothing I can do about that now. No one can change the past. I could have destroyed Mewtwo then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was that friendship we'd had developed. Whatever it was one of my mistakes. By letting Mewtwo go free, he was able to gain the assistance, if not the trust, of true Mews, excluding Nikiro and myself. I fled the small clearing, leaving Mewtwo and Nikiro behind. I headed home to Pallet Town. I didn't know what I was planning to do until I got there, but I felt the need to return. I felt a slight presence behind me and glanced back. Nikiro was following closely behind. There was something different about him, though, a sadness in his eyes. "Ash, what are you doing?" he asked so softly. I glared at him. It wasn't his business to worry about me. I didn't know why he was always trying to make it his business. He should know better and just leave me alone. I decided to ignore him. I could see Pallet Town in the distance. My home. A human town? That's where you live? Are you crazy? I shook those thoughts out of my head. Of course that's where I live. That's where I was born and lived all my life. You've changed, young one. That strange voice caught me off guard, and I practically skidded to a stop. I glanced all around me for the source of the voice. Nikiro stopped beside me in confusion. "What's wrong, Ash?" he asked. "Shut up," I snapped. "What?" I could feel his dejection, but I had no time to worry about him. "Who are you?" I demanded to the new voice. "Show yourself!" I felt a swelling in temperature. Something was approaching. "Very well then, Ashura." From out of nowhere, a huge bird of fire and brilliant colors appeared before me. The light that shone from its feathers was almost blinding. "Ho-Oh," Nikiro whispered. I glanced at him and saw that he had his head bowed in reverence. I looked back at the bird. It was beautiful, really. It was as if he had brilliance of the sun and the beauty of a rainbow that had been molded together to form a single awesome creature that lived and breathed like everyone else. The air stirring around the bird shimmered in heat and light, but I stayed steady and focused on the bird. "Haven't I seen you before?" I asked. I felt it smile at me. "Indeed we have, Ashura. I still remember that day when you first left Pallet. A beautiful day indeed." "Yeah, right," I scoffed. "All that for what? For this? For everything that's happened to me?" "Everyone must face their own obstacles, but everyone does need some help along the way as well. I am the guardian of this realm. Since the day you were born, you have been under my protective care." "What? You mean all this time you—" "Don't be angry at me, Ashura. I was only doing my duty." "You and your duty," I muttered. "Listen to you. You sound just like Nikiro." Nikiro stared at me at the mention of his name. "You're all trying to protect me. Don't you get it? I don't need your help. I can make my own way. I don't need you." Ho-Oh shook her head slowly. "Please don't misunderstand me, Ashura. It's not just you that I am protecting. As you know, not too far from Pallet Town, there is a ruin that modern humans have named Pokemopolis. There was a sacred realm in its time, and I resided not too far from there. I protect all that surrounds me. Today, Pallet Town is the city of which I guard. That you came from there, and also evolved into the most powerful being that I know of, isn't mere coincidence." "So you're saying that this was planned all along?" "No, Ashura. It could have been anyone that reached the point where you are now, or it could have been no one at all. There are always two possibilities. You might even call them backups of each other. You see, we knew since the end of the Great War that a Dark Mew would come into existence sometime in the distant future. We also knew that there was a possibility that the Dark Mew could be stopped before it could destroy the planet and its inhabitants. This effort would have to come from a pure one. There are many definitions of pure. We didn't know exactly which one was meant by the prophecy. Like all things, only time could tell. Since that time, I have been monitoring everyone from Pallet Town, looking for possible pure ones, and even the Dark Mew. When you and the 4 other trainers left Pallet last year, I could feel that your heart was powerful, and I also felt Gary's strong will to succeed, both with equal in strength. I gave you both an extra consideration of how powerful you would turn out to be. At the time, the prophecy could end up in any form, but I knew at least one of you would be involved, somehow." Gary. I felt the anger boil up inside me. Once again, it was Gary who had equaled me. It was Gary who had been brought into the spotlight. It was Gary, who had once been my friend. It was Gary who betrayed me. "It's obvious now who plays the biggest role in all of this," Ho-Oh continued. "But which role you play?" Ho-Oh trailed off and peered down at me, looking inside of me, where she had no business to be looking. "Is it really that hard to figure out?" I asked coldly. She seemed to sigh. "It's harder than you can imagine, Ashura. I can feel a strong change inside of you. But you are still Ash Ketchum, the boy from Pallet Town, the Indigo League champion, and a small Pikachu's best friend." Ho-Oh looked into my eyes, and I stared right back into hers. They were soft and brown, a contrast to the rest of her fiery body. "Let me go home." Ho-Oh blinked at me in surprise. "Is that all you want?" "Yes, and you're in my way." Ho-Oh continued to stare at me, trying to figure me out, looking at me from the inside. Then I saw her eyes widen, and I knew that she knew. "You are the Dark Mew," she whispered in horror. "I didn't want to believe it." "Well, now you know," I replied. I don't know for sure where those words were coming from. They were coming from inside me, yes, but it didn't really seem like it was me that was saying them. I call it the disease. This disease that has been haunting me ever since I first entered the fog. Or maybe even earlier than that. Maybe it afflicted me that day in the woods. Or maybe I'm just making up excuses to ease my conscience. I didn't have a virus swimming around inside of me that day. No one had gone and done anything to my mind. It must have been me. "I can't allow you to enter Pallet Town then," Ho-Oh stated stoically. "I think you will," I answered. Ho-Oh gave me a strange look. Amazement? Fear? One of those. "What do you—" "Move." "But I just told you, I can't—" "You can, and you will." "What are you talking about, Ash—" I'd had enough. I shot a psychic blast straight forward. I didn't even have to aim. Ho-Oh was only a few feet away and directly in my path. "Ash! Don't!" Nikiro yelled. Too late. A loud, shrieking cry rang through the air, Ho-Oh's voice remaining beautiful even in pain. The bird fell backwards, then plummeted towards the earth, gathering speed as she fell. I wasted no time continuing on my way. "Ho-Oh!" Nikiro screamed. For once, he left me alone and dove after the bird. I hoped that would be the last time I had to blast Ho-Oh out of my way. If she had really been telling the truth about protecting me before, then it wouldn't do any good to put her in any real harm. From behind me came the screaming cry of an injured pride and body. I glanced back to see Ho-Oh rising up to a level height with me. I could see that her eyes were no longer calm and tranquil, but blazed with fury. She let out another cry, no longer using mind speak, but fueling her animal rage. She shot towards me faster than anything I'd ever seen before. I teleported to a spot higher up and watched as she zipped through the air. When she realized she hadn't hit me, she flapped to stop herself, then looked at me again with that same anger. "I thought you were supposed to be protecting me," I chided. "I can do that no longer," she answered. "You have become a threat to this land and everyone in it." With that, she flew at me again. This time, I didn't even have to teleport to get out of the way. When she was above me again, she glared down at me, and I saw a ball of fire begin to appear around her. As I watched, it only grew larger and larger, raising the air temperature much higher than it had been before. Finally, it shot straight at me. I countered with a swift psychic attack that burrowed through the flame and dispersed it, then hit the unprepared bird of light. Ho-Oh was racked with the painfulness of the attack, then began to fall again. "Ho-Oh!" Nikiro yelled again. I'd almost forgotten about him. If this is bothering him so much, why doesn't he try to help her? "I didn't want to have to do that, Ho-Oh," I called down to her. My words must have stirred something inside of her, because she rose back up this time and rammed me with her beak. Before I could react, she'd lit her body on fire, and me with her. I had to struggle to summon up a small protective shield, but after that, I knew what I had to do. Forget the fact that she was supposed to be protecting you. She didn't do a very good job of it, did she? After all, look what happened. And now, she's just in the way. I think she knew what I was planning on doing, because she tried to shake me off, but I clung tight. I reached out with my mind and inflicted upon her as much pain as possible. The fire receded, and the natural light that was shining from her feathers dulled as the blue light of Psychic took over. "Ash! What are you doing? Stop it!" It's about time he decided to do something. I ignored Nikiro and hit Ho-Oh with one last blast, as deep within her as I could. The light instantly shut off as she drifted apart from me. As I watched, she began to fall and spiral, plummeting down to the earth without moving a muscle. In seconds, she crashed to the earth and still didn't move. I looked at Nikiro. His mouth was hanging open and he was staring at Ho-Oh. I couldn't think of anything to say to him, so I headed to Pallet Town. After all, it would be a waste to have cleared the path, but not taken it. I've heard that Ho-Oh is supposed to be the bird of life, with the ability to revive itself if it passes away. That was the last time I'd ever seen it. Maybe that myth wasn't true.